Again, I'm going to shift in order to keep the thread going, which is blogging. The web, blog, cell phone, podcasting have blossomed as sources for information and news. Is this a positive development? And I ask that question because a debate has already begun. The New Yorker had a piece recently questioning whether the so-called citizen journalists are helping disseminate good information or fake information or anything that is purports to be news and information without any editorial control. And of course, we've seen television stations urging people to transmit pictures and news reports by cell phone. What do you see as the future of all of this, and are you concerned about that?
Well, I'm a fundamentalist when it comes to the First Amendment. I believe the more voices, the better. I do. I have spent a good bit of time reading into the period between the Jefferson's second administration and the Civil War. By 1840, there were over 1,000 independent newspapers in this country. To be a newspaper person at that time simply meant you had to have a little printing press and be able to buy ink, and you could be a newspaper publisher or a newspaper editor. And it was a feisty time in American democracy. It was a time when democracy really took root to contravene the power of the landholders and others. And that was a healthy time in American democracy. In fact, Tom Johnson over here and I come from the South. The South suffered, the South drove the truth about slavery from the pulpit, from the classroom, and from the schoolroom. And we suffered enormously. It took a bitter civil war to bring the truth home again. I served in the Johnson administration with Tom Johnson. I should say a word about Tom for those of you who are business students. Tom was 22 years old when I asked him to come to my side at the Peace Corps, at the White House. Some people said that I hired him because he was a White House fellow, but that I called him because he had an MBA from Harvard. That had nothing to do with it. It had to do with the fact that I noted on his resume he'd been a reporter for the Macon Telegraph in Georgia, and Tom came over to be my deputy in the White House press office and went on to become the closest man to the president and became publisher of the Times-Herald in Dallas, the Los Angeles Times, and then president of CNN for a long and successful run. But Tom knows that we circled the wagons in the Johnson White House and didn't pay enough attention to the brave reporting of a David Halberstam and a Morley Safer, whom I mocked when he, as the press secretary, when he showed the Marines lighting the huts with a lighter. So I have become a fundamentalist in believing that we had probably solved slavery, the issue of slavery, sooner if there'd been a blogosphere then, so that people outside the insulated culture that was receiving the official truth of the day had alternative views of reality. The troubling side of it is something that all of you mentioned. The demise of editors is a dangerous omen for our time. Editors are paid. Their calling is to check sources, to require grounding, to make sure you get it right. There's more opinion on the blogosphere than there is news and information, as you say, although if you learn to track the flow of information, you can stay abreast of interesting news and information. But the demise of editors means that people who I think anyone can call yourself a journalist, and citizen journalists are a good idea. I noticed a story just this week where two housewives, former journalists who had left the field in order to raise children, had set up a little operation in Colorado, and they were tracking the credibility of statements made by different political candidates. And they broke a very important story that may be decisive in a close Colorado race, because they found out something about one of the candidates that the mainstream press had ignored, a factual reality that had not been reported. There's another woman, another former journalist, who's raising 3 children in Massachusetts, and she's starting a website seeking funding called muckrakingmothers.org. I love it. And she's enlisting journalists, inactive journalists, because they're doing other things at the moment, to practice their skill at home. That's useful. Nonetheless, when you come to certain basic information that is essential for society, the need of an editor is paramount. And the loss of editors in the blogosphere and the demise of editors on many newspapers and in our business of broadcasting is a serious omen.